Last night, California Governor Gavin Newsom tapping Laphonza Butler to fill the Senate seat of Dianne Feinstein. The significance of this interim appointment.
I think it's an extraordinarily smart move of Gavin Newsom's. He put himself into a bit of a bind in 2021. He made a pledge that he would appoint, if he had the opportunity to appoint, an African-American female to the Senate. Now, the problem that he then encountered was in the interim, Barbara Lee, Katie Porter, Adam Schiff had all thrown their hat into the ring for the primary season in early 2024. That was after Dianne Feinstein had announced that she wasn't going to run for re-election in 2024. Well, Newsom didn't want to tip the scales there, and I think it was very wise not to do so. You have an open primary, you have three extremely credible candidates, all three of which have very, very strong congressional records, and all three of which have put in a tremendous amount of effort to build up their political infrastructure in the run-up to those primaries. So Newsom didn't want to tip the scales, and Barbara Lee was lobbying very, very hard to be announced as the interim senator. And I think quite rightly, Newsom said, you know what, I'm going to step back out of this fight. And so he turned to somebody who wasn't an elected official. He turned to the Emily's List president, Laphonza Butler. And she has a strong track record. She's got a strong record as a Labour leader. She's got an extremely strong record as the president of Emily's List. She's defending LGBTQ rights. She's defending abortion rights. She's a very, very credible senator. And she obviously struck a good deal with Newsom because what he didn't extract from her was a promise not to run in 2024. So she's a caretaker senator, but if she wants to throw her hat in the ring and file paperwork by December 8th, she can throw her hat in the ring and become the fourth candidate for the open seat. I think it's going to be a fascinating political time. I'm really, really glad that he appointed somebody so quickly. I think it could have been a very drawn-out process. The Democrats don't have a big enough majority in Congress and the Senate for that to be a safe move. I think it was a far smarter move to do this quickly, to put somebody in power in the Senate and to move on, because now it means that the Democrats again have a workable majority in the Senate and they can start passing more legislation. I think he did something very sensible yesterday.
Isn't this a slap in the face to Barbara Lee? Because his reasoning was that he didn't want to tip the race, as you pointed out, with these three strong candidates. But unlike when McCain died and Senator Kyle came back, truly interim, was not running, he has now introduced a fourth person who could be a candidate, right? Laphonza Butler. And of course, he had gone back on his word to appoint an African-American woman to the Senate after Kamala Harris became the vice president. So he was going to do it. The question was, I mean, as late as Sunday, the Congressional Black Caucus sent him a letter saying he should appoint Barbara Lee, who would fill out the term and then run with the others.
Yeah, I mean, Barbara Lee is clearly extremely unhappy by this. And, you know, to a degree, she's a little bit unlucky by the process, the way it's unfolded, the timing of Dianne Feinstein's death and so on. But if you look at the polling, Katie Porter and Adam Schiff are pretty far ahead in the polling, and Barbara Lee's a distant third. If you look at the fundraising, the same thing holds. Katie Porter and Adam Schiff have built up these large political war chests, and Barbara Lee is far behind in the fundraising. Now, that's not because her politics aren't good. It's not because she doesn't have, you know, a very noble history in Congress. I think at least in part it's because Californians are looking for a generational change. Dianne Feinstein was 90 years old. She was the longest-serving female U.S. senator. Dianne Feinstein had a very, very strong, very important history. You talked about it in your program earlier. But she was 90 years old, and she should have retired years ago. If you're looking for a generational change, it's very hard to justify how you get that generational change when you shift from a 90-year-old to a 77-year-old, which is how old Barbara Lee is, I believe. It's much easier to see that you get a generational change if you shift to somebody who's in their 50s or maybe 60s and who's got a realistic chance of serving in the Senate for 2, 3, maybe even 4 terms. Now, Laphonza Butler fits that. She's in her 50s. She's young. She's dynamic. She could, if she makes a good effort at it, be there for a long time. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, look, we need to have an open competition to see who the next senator is going to be. And maybe Barbara Lee will win. Maybe when that competition is held, maybe when the open primary is held, of all the major candidates, voters will say, look, we like Barbara Lee's policies best. We're willing to overlook the fact that it's not really a generational change, and we're going to go for Barbara Lee. But she's got to earn that. I don't think anybody has the right to say, I'm going to be the next U.S. senator. You've got to work to be the next U.S. senator. And that goes for Laphonza Butler, it goes for Adam Schiff, it goes for Katie Porter, it goes for Barbara Lee. So I think, yes, Newsom's going to attract some flack for this choice, but I think overall he did something politically smart, and he did something that really is going to help keep the Senate functioning over the coming months.
Interesting choice. On the one hand, she was a union leader, represented home health care workers for the SEIU in California. More recently, of course, an advisor to Kamala Harris, the vice president, and advised Uber as it fought the California law requiring app companies to grant workers employee benefits.
Yes, she did. And I think when we come to the primaries, if she decides to throw her hat in the ring for the 2024 Senate race, when it comes to the primaries, that's certainly something that's going to be discussed. Because you're right, she has a very progressive track record with the SEIU, which is one of the better and most progressive unions in California, extremely effective. And yet at the same time, as you said, she's been on the wrong side of this issue with Uber. And, California has had a whole bunch of labor disputes. It's had a whole bunch of legislation around labor. And it's had this initiative that was trying to essentially treat Uber drivers and Lyft drivers as employees, which they are. They should get benefits. They should get paid sick time. They should get health care. They should get retirement. And they don't. And she's lobbied very hard on the side of Uber against that policy change. So I do think that come the primary, that's going to be something she has to talk about. If she decides to run for the Senate, she is going to have to prove her progressive credentials. I think there's no doubt about that. But I think she also has a very strong record over most of her career around union issues, around progressive issues that are dear to progressives' hearts in California and elsewhere. I think she's a very credible senator.